Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I am very excited to share with you some tips and tricks on how to make sure that you are going to end up hopefully with a good office to work in, but also to understand what an office is thinking about when they are doing the interviewing process for you. So let me share my screen and we will get started right away. All right, so today's webinar is tips for the candidate. So if you are here on behalf of an office or you're a hiring manager, this is not necessarily information directly to you. However, it's still going to be good content, good information either way if you just flip the script to understand from the other point of view. But 8 things hiring managers don't want to hear in an interview. So answer interview questions in a way that doesn't look bad and also that's not going to show a negative light or negative version of you. Those are some of the things that we're going to cover and talk about. You're going to get tips today that will allow you to put yourself in the interviewer's shoes to better understand how answers are taken by the interviewer. And these tips are hopefully going to help prepare you for any future interview that you have in those processes. So who am I? My name is Wendy Aldaman. I am your speaker today. I have been in love with dentistry and in dental for the last 15 years as a dental assistant, turned into a manager. Now I'm a recruiter and a business owner. When I am not hiring, these are my 2 adorable little kids. I love constructing magnetile towers with my kids. I also enjoy cooking and baking and crafting of way too many kinds, which also reminds me I need to do a practice run cake for a friend of mine, her daughter's birthday. So that'll come after this webinar. My mission is to help with a hiring and the onboarding processes for offices and for candidates to help foster long-term growth for you and for the office as well. So getting right into it. Number one, young people today do X, Y, and Z. This can also be on the flip side. So you can also say the same type of thing for a quote unquote older person, right? This example that I'm giving is younger, but you can of course flip the script and so both parties can hear. Why don't we want to hear this? Right? It can be discriminatory and it can also seem like you're looking down on others due to their age. I've even had candidates in the past ask how old I am as the interviewer. And I know when they're doing that, they're just trying to understand how much they can expound on the rest of the statement that they're thinking of, right? And so I urge you to reframe your thinking when you negatively think of the younger generation that is working today. Come at younger people with curiosity instead of potentially accusatory. Um, I'm sure that when you were the younger generation, that quote unquote older people of today said the same thing about you. You probably just didn't hear it as much because nowadays we have social media to really explore all options and avenues of literally everything today. Okay. So we hear it more that this is a quote unquote problem because social media has really uh, profusely allowed that to be in the media these days. And personally, I know that it goes both ways, like I said earlier. A lot of older people get shade, and so do a lot of younger people. And that's just one of those things in life that you can completely omit from the story that you tell in the interviewing process. Um, and, I've really been working hard on storytelling over the last few years. And I got to say, this also leads into many other areas in life. So, for example, if you are adding, quote unquote, these young people or these old people, if omitting that, the age or the assumption of the age doesn't help your story, it's going to hurt you in the long run. So if you are clear and concise in the answers that you give in an interview, that is just going to help you so much more in the long run. Okay. Hopefully I didn't hopefully that all made sense. Um Saying this, the young people of today do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't show that you have good teamwork values. Um, and it could potentially cause concern or lead to drama in the office. Okay. All right. Let's hit the next question. Number two, I don't do blank. I don't do that as a blank position. That's the blank position. That's their job that they do. All employees should be willing to help one another in the office, regardless of your position or your title. Managers want to work with and hire team players. And if you're not one, they're not going to want to hire you. And if they assume that you are not a team player, they're not going to want to hire you. So if this is your way of thinking, I don't do that as my position, I would suggest for you to reword how you approach teamwork conversations. So I can give a little bit of a for example, but if you tend to keep to yourself more and do the duties that are asked of you, that's wonderful, right? So there's a time and a place for everyone, and every individual is going to fit perfectly into one kind of a position or another. So if you are a check off my duties list and that's it, that's okay. That's just the position that you're going to be looking for. And if that's the case, then before you hire on, maybe even before you go into a working interview or a shadow day, ask to see if you can see the list of the job duties. Now, the job posting, where you see the ad, where you apply to the ad, it probably has a lot of the job duties, or a lot of them are implied due to your job title. And so ask if you can see a list of the job duties. See what's on that. And then let's say, for example, if you're a hygienist, if you see this list and you see that the list says help in sterilization or call patients, then I would encourage you to inquire how much or how often you're going to have to perform these other duties. And outside of your general scope of tasks, right? Ask how much you're going to be doing these. And maybe they say, like I said, if you're a hygienist, maybe it's just when your patients cancel. Okay, well, what happens if you have an entire morning that cancels? Do they want you to call off, or do they want you to come in and do sterilization? Or do they want you to come in and call patients? And what are you most comfortable with? What would you rather do? Because you got to pick one of the two evils, right? So you're going to have to weigh your options and see if this is a good job, depending on how much or how frequently you're going to have to do these quote unquote other duties that maybe isn't something you're typically open to doing. And I've worked with people like this in the past, like I mentioned earlier, and it's not always a bad thing. A lot of these people are extremely literal, and that's great. When I create tasks, when I create a duties list or a handbook for anyone that I'm working with or working on behalf of, or for my company, I think in my head, what would Jamie say if I present this to her? And she doesn't even know that she's helped me like this. She doesn't realize that she's helped me in these ways. And when she has said in the past, okay, well, this is exactly what the handbook says. Read the way that things are written. If you are somebody, let's say an office manager, that you're writing a handbook, that's an excellent way to think too. What would somebody who's extremely literal, what would they say, right? These are all things that can be tied into the position that you have. This also can appear like it's pushback from an office, if you have to give new tasks. And you also have to think about that. So put yourself in the employer's shoes. If you heard this in an interviewer, what would you think? Be careful on the way that you word things, that the answers that you give. I want you to come across in the best light that best represents you. Number three, I didn't really get along with my last boss or coworker. This is usually like when somebody's asking for you to talk about your last office, or can you give references from your last office, or even maybe why you quit with your last job. Negative comments about previous employers or colleagues can suggest that candidates might have trouble with teamwork or team members, or potentially conflict resolution. It raises red flags about your interpersonal skills. Now, you might completely say that the person that you don't get along with could be extremely toxic. However, the office or the interviewer wants to see that you are not going to talk negatively because that's what they are going to assume that's going to happen if you stop working with them in the future. They want to see that you value the team and that teamwork is of utmost importance, especially in a dental office. And like I mentioned earlier, talking negatively about any of your past or present team members in an interview, they're listening and they're wondering, are you going to talk bad about me? So choose your words really carefully. So, for example, if the doctor that you're currently working for, you don't think does good dentistry, remember that the person that you're interviewing with, they might not know the quality of the actual dentistry that they do. They might not actually know that dentistry, that dentist. Now, why I say that is because dentistry is a really small community, no matter where you're at. If you are applying to a job in a different state, that might help you. But if you are within, a greater metropolitan area, dentists talk. They know who knows each other. They know whose buddy is where. And you want to choose your words carefully because they're going to say things, and you don't necessarily know who knows who. Um, but the interviewer that you are talking with, they might think that your last boss or your last coworker does excellent work, or that they have similar styles. And they could be personal friends. If you don't agree with the quality of the dentistry, um, or if you didn't really get along with that individual, keep those answers really short and sweet and to the point. You don't need to over-explain, and sometimes you don't even need to talk about it at all. You can get away with answering questions in a different way. So if somebody asks the question of, why did you leave your last position? You don't need to say this. Instead, you can say, I'm looking for different opportunities. And if they ask you to expound, maybe you can talk about the different services at this dental office that you're interviewing at, or you can talk about a larger practice or a smaller practice. There's a lot of different things that you can say why you're leaving your past practice. You don't have to say that you didn't get along with them. There's a lot of ways that will make it easier for you to potentially get or land a position depending on the way that you word your answers. And then number 4, something that we don't want to hear as an interviewer is being wishy-washy with your future. And I think there's a big difference between being wishy-washy and being flexible. And it's true. Maybe you don't know where you're going to be at in your future. And maybe this position isn't going to be yours forever. But move forward with answers that you can confidently say is true. And again, you don't have to overshare. If you don't know what you're going to do with your future, that's totally okay. I have spoken to so many people that are in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s, and they still say, I don't know what I want to do. That's okay. However, move through this conversation with grace and remain confident that your decision is going to be the best that you can offer. And again, you don't have to over explain. So if you're going to school online and it doesn't affect the office or the time or your position, maybe they don't really need to know about that right now. If you are considering moving to another state, but you're not 100% set on it, maybe they don't need to know that right now. A company that wants to hire you will want to be sure on a few things. They're going to want to know that you have soft skills, which is like how personable or emotionally intelligent you are. They're going to want to know the fact that you're open to learning and that you're committed to the job. So if you're committed to the job, that's fantastic. How are you going to be committed to the job? Confidently answer that question. And you have to think about it in a lot of different ways. You're committed to the job because when you're at work, you're 110%. Or when you're committed to the job, that means you're going to be there from 8 to 5. Or you're committed to the job because you know you're going to give the best patient care out of everybody in the entire office. How are you committed to the job? And that's how you are going to explain your future, either at this office or within what you're planning to do in the future. Share that with them. So if you know that you're looking for only a summer job or a part-time position, I would suggest that you be upfront with them ahead of time, but also show them why they should hire you. A lot of dental offices want full-time team members. To find an office that might be more flexible on part-time, or maybe is okay with, out of the box hours, or maybe a specialist like ortho, for example, they might be open to somebody that is only able to work from 1 to 6 because they probably have a bigger influx of patients at those times, because a lot of ortho patients are typically high school kids or middle school kids. And so after 3 o'clock, they probably have a big boom. And so maybe between 1 and 6, where you can help them with turning over rooms, helping with sterilization, helping with setting up the next day, maybe that could be really beneficial to them if that's a schedule that would work for you. So follow their lead. And again, don't overshare too much if you don't need to. Number 5, when you say that you don't have any weaknesses, this is typically in an interview, you're going to be asked, what are your strengths and weaknesses? At some kind of question similar to that. That's an answer we don't want to hear, is that we don't have a weakness. So the question that I ask when I'm in an interview is, I believe that everybody is always working to be the best version of themselves in any capacity. What is something you're currently working on? Basically, for me, that's me saying, what is your weakness? When somebody says I'm a perfectionist or I don't have any weaknesses, you try to, this is often meant to highlight that you are really great. However, that's not always what the interviewer hears. A lot of times, let's say when you're saying that you're a perfectionist, it's often meant to highlight attention to detail, but it can come across as cliche or self-flattery, or that you are not willing to take on more, or um, to learn more. I guess I should say not take on more, but to learn more. So instead of saying that you are a perfectionist, that's okay. Just maybe say you struggle with delegation. You can say that you struggle with perfectionism. A lot of times when people are quote unquote a perfectionist, it can lead to inefficiencies depending on what your position, what your role is. Unless you're Jesus, you are imperfect, and that's totally okay. Nobody is perfect. And we're all on this giant rock called Earth, trying to do the best that we can. The office doesn't want to hear that you don't have any weaknesses. They want to hear an actual genuine answer. They want to know where your faults are and how that might fit into their office. So if you can tell them how you're working on improving that weakness that you have, and what steps you have taken to move forward with that weakness, that is going to help. I personally will take any answer that is related to the position, or if it's a personal answer, when I ask, what is your weakness? I'm okay if somebody says, is that a personal question or an office question, a positional question. I've had answers from A to Z over the years, and I don't typically hear what people are doing to work on their weakness. I don't always hear that. I do sometimes, but not always. But when I do hear, what they're working on to support what their weakness is, I immediately already feel like this interview is notches above others. And asking, what is your weakness? This is an excellent way to know before you go into any interview. This is an excellent thing to think about before you go into an interview. Maybe go find some continuing education or a brand rep, if that's applicable, or maybe a book to help you through this weakness. And those are some examples and some things that you can go to an interview saying, I am not super proficient with, let's say, taking impressions. How are you going to make that better? I mean, nobody really takes impressions anymore, but that was the first thing that came to mind because a lot of people say that. So what are you going to do to make that better? You're going to go watch YouTube videos. You're going to go find a brand rep to ask, what can help me? Maybe you're going to find some continuing education. Show the interviewer that you're committed to self-improvement and that you're willing to grow. Improving also reflects that you're willing to learn new tasks when an office might ask you of one. With a good interviewer, there's a lot of hidden parts that lie within the questions and the answers. So don't let that get to your head too much, but it really, the way that you answer questions is the entirety of the interview. It's not just one answer. So if you don't know how to answer this very well, your question of, what's your weakness, that's okay. It's just one answer. The point of this webinar today is to help you understand what we're thinking of as the interviewers. Number 6, saying that you hate something. First of all, hate is a very strong word. Sure, everybody doesn't like to be micromanaged. That also goes along with point number 3. You didn't get along with your last coworkers or boss, maybe because they micromanaged you and you didn't like that. Maybe you say that you hate dealing with people. If that's the case, dentistry is probably not the position for you, and the position that you might get is not going to be great. If you say that you hate people, I would highly suggest you to work on that because people are pretty cool. Maybe you say that you hate routine work. Typically, the work in a dental office is pretty routine. Yes, we do see different people and different insurances and different procedures and different schedules every day. But depending on the interviewer and how they perceive you saying that you don't like routine work, that is really what is going to make the big difference, is how the interviewer perceives what your duties are and the answers that you're giving. So, be cautious on saying that you hate anything. Also, keep in mind that if you work at the front and you say that you hate insurance, how much do you have to work with and deal with insurance? Yes, you might dislike some things that you're currently doing in your role and also maybe in your office. However, every office is different. So even though it might be the same task, it might totally feel different working at another office. So refrain from saying that you hate something that you do on a daily basis. Maybe you dislike something, but also kind of shed a little bit light. There's a lot of people who say that they don't really like insurance. Well, does anybody in dentistry really like insurance? No, they're kind of an evil. However, if you can say, I don't really like the concept of insurance and what that does to dentistry or what that does to dental offices, that is a different way to answer the question versus just saying, I hate insurance. Okay. Number 7, when somebody tells me I've applied to a lot of jobs, which one is this for? This is usually like halfway through the interview, and that is not super great. So showing that you put effort into and doing a little bit of research and learning about the practice before you even start the interviewing process is a really good idea. It really reflects well onto the interviewer. It also, if you have a list of questions or information about the office, it's going to show that you have good organizational skills that are important to just about any role in a dental office. So when you're not keeping track of who you're speaking with, it can reflect badly on you in the interview. At a bare minimum, when preparing for a job interview, regardless of if it's in person or over the phone, you should look up the location and check out a little bit about the office and the website. So that you're able to be prepared with questions that you might have in an interview. I do have a document that can help you keep organized, as well as like 35 plus questions that you can ask. If you're interested in that, then please let me know. I can send it to you. But let's say, for example, if an office calls and they quickly say like, hi, this is Wendy from Dr. Smith's office. Is this Samantha? Well, maybe you missed Dr. Smith's office, or you didn't understand it, or maybe you didn't know that that's how it was pronounced. That's okay. If So if they call and say that really quickly, and you applied for this dental assisting role, they ask, do you have any time to chat? Then of course you can say, I'm so sorry, I didn't catch the name of the practice. I want to make sure that I have my notes pulled up about your practice. That's a much better way to say it than I applied for a lot of jobs. Which one is this? This sounds like that you don't really care about the position or about this office, right? So instead, say it in a little bit of a different way. I didn't catch the name of the practice. I want to make sure that I have my notes pulled up about your practice. It's so much better to hear something like that than what I have on the screen. Being a polished interviewee can absolutely make or break you. My mission at Career Elevation is to help people stay in their ideal jobs for the longevity. I'm not just a butt in a seat kind of recruiter. I'm here to help you succeed in your role now and in the future. And I do have several other webinars that you can download right now on my website. You can see that a link to my website at the very end of this. But I am here to help support you and help you to understand more what interviewers want to hear, or just in general, like how you can get into a really great office. Okay, my last point today is, oh, I'm so sorry. There was another thing there and I totally forgot about it. 47% of recruiters say that they would reject a candidate who has little knowledge about the company that they're applying to. I would totally agree. I know that it automatically brings up red flags when somebody says, I've applied to a lot of jobs. Which one is this? The way that you say things is so very important, because not only is it important right now while you're interviewing, it's also important once you get into an office. And that's what they're thinking about. When you get into an office, what are you going to say to the patients? Are you just going to spit out anything that's on your mind? Or are you going to be very articulate about the answers that you give to your patients? Okay. Number 8 is, I don't have any questions. Yes, you do. I have already given many examples in this webinar. And like I said in the last slide, I have over 30 questions that you can ask if you're going into an interview. Yes, you do have questions. So if you're curious where to start looking up questions, you don't know what kind of questions that you should be asking, start by their Google reviews and see what their patients are saying. Go to their social media pages. What kind of content do they produce? Do they have a team members page on their website? You can ask if they'll be at the office the day that you go in for shadow, or you can ask, what does the longevity of the team members look like? Why is this position open? Maybe where do you see this company growing in the next 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 years? Ask more specific questions about the owner or the associate that you might be working with, or maybe the direct manager or the leader or the team members. Does the website say that, let's say, for example, that they're a general dentist? A lot of websites for general dentists will say that they do TMD or sleep apnea or root canals or digital dentistry. Ask more about those specific services. Depending on what role you're in, of course, don't ask, a root canal question. If you're a hygienist, you probably don't really care too much about that, I would assume. And so, sometimes when a website says that an office does TMD work, sometimes that's just for SEO, that's just for marketing purposes. And they don't actually really do a lot. Or maybe they did at one point and they're still trying to maybe bring that in a little bit. How much TMD work do they do? And are you comfortable with that? So if you're on the phone and they are asking to schedule an in-person visit, maybe ask more questions about what the schedule is going to look like. Or will this be an interview only, or a shadow day, or a working interview? Does the team wear scrubs? If you're like at the front maybe, or would you rather that I fit in if this is just a shadow day? Can I just wear scrubs, or do you want me to wear dress clothes? Do you want me to fit in so that the patients just think that I'm observing rather than coming in for an interview? Would you like me to wear dress clothes? What is going to be best for you? And last but not least, one of my favorite sets of questions to hear. Three questions that are very similar, but also a little different at the same time. At this time, do you have any reservations about me or my abilities? Is there anything I can clarify for you about my qualifications? Is there anything else I can provide to you that would be helpful going forward? These are my favorite, like three sets of questions at the end of an interview because it really helps the interviewer to reflect back. And so give them a moment. Hopefully, they actually will reflect back. But the purpose is to reflect back on the conversation that you've already had. And maybe what are your reservations? And if they do have reservations, that's okay. This is a great time for you to help get that clarified. If they have reservations and you can see, oh, I see why that's a reservation. Yeah, absolutely, this is not going to be the office for me. You can tell them. That's okay. They don't want to waste their time just as much as you don't want to waste your time. So be considerate of that when you are, going through the interview process, that you can also tell them what reservations that you have because maybe there's just a lack of information, a lack of share, right? Maybe you need to ask more questions. Maybe they need to ask more questions or answer more questions, and that's okay. Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you today. I am so excited to hear if you do get the opportunity to um, do an interview. And if you've got any questions, I am more than happy, more than pleased to do my best to help you and to also help you understand maybe some questions or some answers that you might have going into this process. Thank you for the opportunity to let me talk with you today, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thanks so much.